where do you find God? Almost sounds like a loaded question, doesn't it? I mean, if God was someone you could find, wouldn't everyone be out searching? Well, rather than looking for something elusive, like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I reckon it's more about learning to recognise the way God is already present to us in our everyday lives. I'm Lizzie Oakes, and this is Where Do You Find God? My guest on the podcast today is Pete Mcarthur, who along with his wife Sarah are the lead pastors of Elim Church in Henderson. Welcome to the podcast today, Pete.
It is so cool to be here.
You and I haven't met before, but I know, I did a little bit of my research. I discovered that you've got 3 boys. Yeah. That must keep you pretty busy, I would imagine.
Yeah, they're busy boys, and but no, it's cool. We have a pretty fun life, and they keep things interesting.
What age range are they?
Yeah, so our eldest is 8, and he loves Boys Brigade. He's so into it.
And a little uniform.
Yeah, he just loves tying the knots, and they did a cooking class last week actually, which was so cool.
Excellent.
And so he came
Start
home
them
and
young.
I know, he cooked dinner for us.
Oh,
he cooked like
at 8?
meat patties. Yeah. I know, because he'd learned it at Boys Brigade. But
so good.
But yeah, we've got Hudson who's 6, and our youngest is 2.
Yeah,
so he's cool too.
That is a busy household. I was going to ask, what do you do in your spare time? Do you get any spare time? What is it that kind of outside of ministry and family that sort of floats your boat?
Well, I kind of have settled down into just like suburban life. I play golf on Fridays and love it. My Takere Golf Club is a beautiful course. Yeah, love it. Love getting out there in the quiet, and I play on my own.
It sounds
which
nice.
is still and beautiful. Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds like a good place to be. So, Pete, in Acts chapter 17, verse 27, it says that God intended that they would seek him and reach out for him, though he is not far from each one of us. So my question for you today, Pete, is where do you find God?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And for me, if I can just back up a little bit, I was raised in a home where at Sunday school they tell you to read your Bible and pray every day. And I think for some of my life that was a good way to connect with the Lord. And but I would say that in my mid-30s, I hit some tough experiences. And with those tough experiences, I had some kind of stuff of my own to work through. And I found the thought of like sitting down in a comfortable chair in the corner of your room with Bible and prayer to be not overly attractive.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe it's a guy thing and kind of the nervous energy of just kind of wanting to do stuff or move or walk around or do some of those things. I didn't find that to be successful anymore. And so in talking with a counsellor, he suggested that I go for walks. And so at that time, I started going for these walks in the morning at about 6 o'clock. And I'd go for these walks. And on my walks, what I still do it now, is that I divide my time up on the walk into these 3 categories.
Okay.
As a way of just outworking some discipline. So my first one is that I say out loud things that I'm grateful for.
That's nice.
And it's cool. And often it's just like the trees that I'm walking past.
Did you do it this morning?
I didn't actually. I slept in. Yesterday was big, but I slept in. It was not a good day.
But maybe you were grateful for the sleep in.
I certainly am right now, yeah. And, so often the trees get a good mention because I just walk past them. I think, oh, cool, I'm looking for something to be grateful for. I'll thank God for those trees. And I find that really helpful. So for the first kind of third of the walk, maybe 800 metres of walking, is I'll just say things that I'm grateful for. Kids, my car, and just, being awake at that time.
The fact that you moved from Christchurch to Auckland and it's warmer.
Oh, I'm very grateful, especially at 6 a.m. Yes. Christchurch in the winter is maybe -3 on a, I'm grateful that it's like 8 degrees or 12 degrees. So, And I'm a Pentecostal pastor, and so the second third of my walk is that I'll pray in tongues.
Okay.
And so what that does for me is that, particularly when I was going through that tough time, the prayers would come out often quite negative.
Yeah.
Or often quite self-focused of like, God, I need you to do this thing for me. Or God, why haven't you done this thing for me that I prayed about last week, but it hasn't been done? Or I don't even know if I should be praying for these things. And so what prayer in tongues does for me is that it just kind of settles in my heart that, okay, I'm going to pray whatever God's going to, whatever his will is really. And so it's kind of like an acceptance thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That sounds healthy.
Yeah, yeah. And also it's just a good discipline to get you out of that like shopping list style thing, which is not a bad thing to pray, but I just found myself like
stuck in this
negative loop, hey? And it was good. It was really helpful. It's really helpful. And so on my walk I'll do those things, and then as I'm circling back to my house, what I'll do is I have a declaration that I will say out loud. The counsellor said, I want you to say this thing with as much kind of gumption and feeling as you can. And so because I'm a preacher, like I just flick into that mode. And so I'm sure the neighbours think that's just the weirdest thing ever. There's this guy walking down the street just ranting and raving. But,
yeah, and it's like, gee, how does his voice project like that? And he hasn't even got a microphone.
Yeah. So sometimes I wonder if there's like some guys sitting in their front yard thinking there's just this lunatic who keeps walking down my street and talking about something. But I'll do that a declaration, which the content is that I'll just declare over myself that no matter what happens that day, no matter how hard the experiences are, no matter kind of how significant people's criticism might be, or whatever happens, that my life has value because God says that I have value.
Yeah.
And that I'll say, and I say this kind of thing, I say, something is only worth what someone's prepared to pay.
Yeah.
And my God was prepared to exchange the life of his son for mine.
So you have those practices.
Yeah.
But what interests me is that earlier in our conversation at the very beginning, you talked about playing golf.
Yeah.
And you talked about being there and it was really quiet.
Yeah.
What's that like? And when you think about being there in that quiet space on that golf course, where do you think God is?
Well, that's funny. Sometimes I've asked God for golf tips.
Oh, cute.
But sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think he's more interested in just being there.
Being there.
Yeah. There's this practice that, I forget who did it, but it was in the 60s, and he called it centering prayer. And the idea of centering prayer is that...
Is that Brother Lawrence or somebody like that? I don't know.
Yeah, someone like that. Yeah. And his whole thing was that it's prayer that resembles sitting down next to a close friend and looking at the sunrise, and no one needs to say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea is that you're trying to empty your mind of actual words and just sit there in the stillness with God.
And be.
Yeah, and be.
And would that be a sense of that when you're on the golf course?
Yeah, definitely for me, yeah. I play way better golf when it's like that, which is a plus.
Yeah. So
when I play with other people.
It's quiet and it's centered.
Yeah.
And so in that golf course where you're quiet and centered, and it's that sense of sitting next to someone that you know well and you don't have to say anything. Yeah. What's that God like?
Yeah. That God is is accepting. Yeah. And patient. And as a young parent, that's a discipline for me, is that acceptance doesn't come as naturally as it might. But I can see in the eyes and in the interactions of my grandparents, they've lived enough life to be just patient with the fact that the people who are coming after them are walking their journey, but they're there, and that's a really good thing. And so I sometimes picture God like that. Like he's wise enough to know that it's all going to be okay, and that change will come when it's the right time. And that simply being present with somebody is the right thing, maybe for that moment.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Pete, thank you for joining me today on Where Do You Find God?
Thank you. It's been awesome. Yeah.
If you'd like to listen again, tune in to Sanctuary on Wednesdays at 1:30 p.m, or listen and subscribe via your favourite podcast app, and give us a review so other people can find us.